Today I'm talking about upgrading biogas waste stream to create a renewable source of revenue.
I think they have treatment for it in the building.
Biogas is produced by digesting waste streams that can come from many sources, such as agricultural waste streams, wastewater treatment plants, or municipal solid waste streams, such as landfills. Once these waste streams go through anaerobic digestion, they produce something called biogas, which consists of about 60% methane, about 60% carbon dioxide, and various other impurities, some of which may be toxic. The problem with biogas is that its value and its efficiency is greatly lowered by having carbon dioxide and other impurities present. So what we decided to do at Lawrence Livermore National Lab was develop a composite sorbent that can remove the carbon dioxide and increase the efficiency and the value of the biomethane produced in the biogas. Typically, raw biogas is processed currently by one of three ways. The first of which is flared, and this means that it's simply burnt. This is typically done because methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's, in fact, at least 20 times worse than carbon dioxide, and so it's favorable to burn the methane and convert it completely to carbon dioxide and then emit the CO2 as a greenhouse gas. I should note here that no value is gained from the biogas by doing this process, and CO2 is emitted. The second route to processing raw biogas is combined heat and power. In this instance, the biogas is burned, but the energy from burning that biogas is used to generate heat or electricity that then can be used on site. And so this is a source of free electricity for the producer. I want to note here that CO2 emissions are also produced by this process. Finally, the third process for raw biogas use is to upgrade it by removing the carbon dioxide. This is a very favorable route to pursue because the high purity biomethane can then be used as renewable natural gas for transportation, and it qualifies for low carbon fuel standard credits. If it's a high enough purity, it can also be injected directly into the natural gas pipeline, which is also an excellent source of revenue. Importantly, the CO2 can be selectively removed from the biogas with this process and captured and stored and sequestered. And so this can also be a carbon neutral process. Currently, less than 10% of the biogas from these waste streams, such as agricultural, wastewater treatment plant, and landfill sources, are used for high-value vehicle fuel or natural gas pipeline injection in the US. And so we see this as a huge potential for growth for the biogas market. This graph demonstrates how biogas is underutilized as an energy source in the US from each of the different sectors. We're focusing in particular in the agricultural sector. The blue bars show the number of operational systems utilizing biogas in each of these sectors, and the orange bars indicate the potential number of systems that could be installed in each of these sectors. And as you can see here, there are many thousands of potential systems that can be installed in the agricultural sector. Importantly, Lawrence Livermore is well positioned because about 1,000 of these small-scale agricultural biogas producers are situated in California. Currently, biogas is a $24 billion global market, and this is expected to grow significantly over the next decade, due primarily to the continuing growth in population. For example, in California alone, in the 2018-2019 year, 12 new anaerobic digester and biogas processing facilities are coming online within the state of California within the agricultural sector. And 11 of the 12 of these processes will be used to produce upgraded renewable biomethane. Here at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, we have been developing CO2 sorbents for nearly a decade. This started in around 2010, where we were encapsulating a sorbent that absorbs carbon dioxide within microcapsules. Since then, we've evolved this technology and reformulated the material into an extrudable solid material so that it could be more readily scaled up. Currently, we're at about a TRL, or a Technology Readiness Level 4, meaning we can produce hundreds of grams of this material, and we've demonstrated it at a bench scale. In the coming years, we will be scaling this up to a kilogram scale and demonstrating it at a pilot scale. I'd like to note here that we have submitted a continuation in place patent application on this technology. As I mentioned before, initially we're focusing on biogas that is produced from agricultural waste sources, such as a dairy, and this is a schematic of what that process might look like. The input is the agricultural waste that is produced by the farm, and this is digested to produce the biogas that consists of methane, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and water predominantly. This gas is then blown through a wet hydrogen sulfide removal unit, and then that gas is again blown through our composite sorbent technology, where the CO2 is removed, leaving only high purity methane. This methane can then be compressed and stored or transported and used as highly valuable transportation fuel or injected directly into the natural gas pipeline. What I'd like to point out here is that the existing technologies for biogas upgrading often suffer from economies of scale, meaning the size of a farm required to make those processes economical often require on the order of thousands of head of cattle. However, our composite sorbent technology can be scaled up or down, and so it can be economical even at a small producer scale, such as a farm with hundreds of head of cattle. I'd also like to point out that we've done some preliminary calculations that estimate the size of the unit required to upgrade the biogas produced from a farm can fit within a shipping container, and so it can be easily transported and installed on a farm and plugged into a digestion process. So far, we've done a bench scale proof of concept of this technology. As you can see in the picture on the left-hand side, this is our bench scale reactor that is packed with our CO2 sorbent material. It contains about 150 grams of our material, and the column reactor is about a foot in length. Interestingly, we are able to produce this material by two ways. We can simply extrude it in the form of something similar to spaghetti noodles, but we can also formulate it such that it can be 3D printed, and so we can have very fine control over the geometry and architecture of the packing material. Usually we extrude this material such that the filaments are on the order of 400 microns in diameter, as you can see in the SEM images of the material. And the CO2 sorbent that actually reacts and captures the CO2 is dispersed homogeneously throughout a polymer matrix. In the top right plot, this is the outlet concentration of each of the gas components after it has been flowed through the column containing our material. And what we see here is exactly what we would expect. Initially, the column was purged with nitrogen, so it contains 100% nitrogen. But then as we switched to biogas that was collected from a wastewater treatment plant source, we can see that the purity of the methane exiting the column is very high, nearly 100%, whereas the concentration of nitrogen, oxygen, and CO2 remain very low, near 0%, for about 90 minutes until the CO2 begins to break through and our material is fully loaded. We've demonstrated that our sorbent material can deliver pipeline quality renewable natural gas, and this is due to a very simple chemical reaction that takes place within our material. The carbon dioxide reacts with carbonate contained inside of our polymer to produce sodium bicarbonate. And you probably know this as a really common material that you find within your kitchen known as baking soda. And so it's a very benign and cheap material, and it can be reused for many cycles simply by stripping the material with air to remove the carbon dioxide or heating the material to recapture the CO2. It is important to note that we can capture the CO2 by heating the material, making this a carbon neutral process. We've done some preliminary techno-economic analysis with our bench scale data to compare our material to other technologies that exist in the field. As you can see, our composite sorbent material, highlighted in green, is very competitive. We can achieve the same methane purity and a very low loss of methane, while also using very low energy consumption. And this is because our material can be regenerated simply by blowing air through it, requiring very minimal amounts of energy. Also important to note is that our material can be scaled very easily up and down depending on the size of the biogas producer, and this results in a very low relative cost of capital expenses compared to other existing technologies, which gives us quite an advantage in the field. In conclusion, we've developed a composite sorbent here at Lawrence Livermore National Lab for biogas upgrading that is capable of removing the carbon dioxide from biogas selectively enough to produce high purity, very valuable pipeline-ready renewable natural gas. This sorbent material requires extremely low energy for regeneration to reuse it from cycle to cycle over many cycles of use. Currently, we are working to prove that this material can be scaled up to a pilot demonstration and work at field conditions and larger scales. Finally, I'd like to leave you with this note that we have produced a composite material at Lawrence Livermore that can significantly increase the value of biogas that is produced from waste streams by removing the CO2 from the biogas and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the team that contributed to making this project possible. Thank you.